So I have with me today Ashley and Alex Natoli. And I have known them, well, since before they were around. I've known their parents and their families for about 40 years. And they went through a very difficult loss. Their second child, precious Benjamin, was taken to heaven a little over 2 years ago. And so graciously, they have agreed to come and talk about what this has been like and what God has done in their lives, along with being transparent about the heartache and the difficulties that have come with this situation. So your second child, Benjamin, was taken to heaven at how old?
He was just like 5 days shy of 7 months.
7 months, okay. So tell us, first of all, however you all want to divide this up, but tell us about Benjamin, like what his personality was, what he was like.
Ornery. he was starting to be ornery and really noticing his big brother Connor.
Okay.
And noticing what made Connor get all uppity too. To where we have a video of him going over and touching what Connor was using as a microphone and saw Connor, and Connor immediately saw him, like took it away and ran out there, and he just kind of looked over like, what happened? What happened? So he definitely has a little ornery spirit, but a smile that could light up a room.
Oh.
Blue eyes and the biggest cheeks and a big old smile, and he would just grab your face and just pull you in for the biggest open, drooliest kiss he could ever give you.
That's precious.
So,
Yeah.
I love it.
what
Yeah,
else, dear?
I think that's probably about it. I was thinking his smile, bright smile, bright eyes, and you know how excited he would get when he saw either of us
Yep.
or
Wow.
Connor, you know. And he was definitely starting to already be that little brother that
Yep.
wanted what Connor had.
Gonna be
you know?
pesky,
So we
Yeah,
could see
I
that
love it.
developing, and Connor, I mean, just really loved him being down and playing and stuff. So we could already see that bond developing.
I remember
And then-
seeing his sweet face in pictures and videos on Facebook and
Yeah.
thinking he was adorable.
Yes.
So tell us what you all would like to tell us about the day that he passed away.
Okay. I think I'll start and then I'll let you take over when I left.
Okay.
So it was kind of a rare Saturday for us because Alexander had been working most every weekend for months. And so Saturday mornings, like family together time hadn't been happening very often. But he was off. It was Mother's Day weekend. And so that morning I remember that we were able to all spend some time together. All four of us were kind of on the couch, you know, playing and snuggling and different things like that. I had plans to go, because we traditionally, the Saturday before Mother's Day, I'll go with my mom and sister and niece, and we'll go get pedicures and go to lunch. So I had planned to do that later in the day. And so about the time I started to get up and get ready to go do that, Benjamin started getting real fussy. And it wasn't really time to feed him again. And he was just fussy. And I, because I was just busily getting ready, didn't really do a whole lot to try to like comfort or console him, because I knew that was just going to make him worse. It was just going to slow me down. And so I got ready. He had started to calm down about the time I was getting ready to leave. And he was on the floor playing. He had a little play mat that he played on, his toys all around him. And I remember when I was getting ready to leave, he was kind of happy again, you know. And so it wasn't too concerned. But I didn't pick him up. And I didn't really, I said bye to him, said, "Mommy loves you," because I always would do that to both boys. But I that's kind of a regret I have that maybe we can talk about later, is that I didn't really pick him up because I knew that would just upset him.
Sure.
He would just get upset again because I would pick him up only to put him right back down. So when I left, he was happy and content. I remember he looked up at me and, you know, I said goodbye to him and I told him I loved him. And then I left. And while we were getting our pedicures, I talked to him on the phone, and he had told me he had he was fine. He'd gotten fussy again. He decided to lay him down for a nap, but he'd calmed down. He'd been in to check on him, and he was fine. And then I didn't hear from him again until we went to lunch, which was probably only about 30 to 45 minutes later. He called me to tell me that the crew had come to get Benjamin because he was unresponsive. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like, what happened? And he was like, he didn't really know what had happened. And so we had just gotten seated. So my mom was in the restroom. She comes out to me on the phone with him. And so we immediately just left. We were all the way in Chester, which was about 15 to 20 minutes away from the hospital they were taking him to. So I just remember saying, I'm not going to make it in time. And it was just, my sister was driving, and we were like, you need to be safe, but she was trying to get there as fast as she could. And I'm going to let him take over, and then I'll pick back up when I got to the hospital.
Okay.
Well, that morning was definitely different because, like she said, I've been working a lot. Usually every Saturday I work, but I decided to take that Saturday off because it was the day before Mother's Day, and she wanted to get her pedicure and stuff done, so I decided not to work that Saturday. So I remember getting up with him and getting him out of his crib, which he hadn't been in for very long. We had just moved him from the side of our bed to a crib, and so I remember getting him up and remember feeding him his bottle, and it was just such a quiet time and rocking him back and forth, and it was just such a peaceful time that morning.
Oh.
And it was just like a good morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was a mama's boy already, to where he loved mama. He would always have mama's attention, always hold her, and loved snuggling with her quite a bit. So he didn't like it when she left. So he was being real fussy and stuff like that. So I tried to get him to play for a little bit while I tried to get him ready and the plan was to go take them to go get mama a gift.
Okay.
But I was waiting because I had some tools I was trying to sell that day, and I was so consumed with that and just so backwards and forwards with that. I was running around trying to get stuff done.
Sure.
And he was just being so fussy, and I'm like, all right, look, I'm just going to go change your diaper, and then I'm just going to sit you down and just let you just kind of hopefully get in a better mood, so when we go out, you're not going to be this big fussy ornery mess type deal. So that was the goal. And so he ended up fussing a little bit, then he settled down. After I let him down, I went and checked on him, and I remember stroking his back, and he took a big breath, and I'm like, okay, you're doing fine, you're good, everything's okay. He was on his belly at that time. He had like moved over or something like that, so I know he moved. So I sold the tools, and I'm like, all right, it's time to go. And I had Connor ready sitting on the couch, and then I go to check on Benjamin, and I'm like, how did you drool everywhere? And then I picked him up, and it wasn't drool, it was vomit.
Okay.
And that's when I realized something was wrong.
Okay.
I didn't hear anything, I didn't hear any noises, I didn't hear no fussing, no nothing. As far as I knew, he was fine. When I went to go check on him, literally no more than 30 minutes later after I just checked on him, there was like vomit there.
Okay.
And he was soaked, and he was also white. And so I picked him up, and he was nothing but a limp noodle in my hand.
Oh.
And that's when I just started like freaking out, like, Connor, wake up, it's time to wake up, come on, wake up, breathe when we do something. I started doing CPR on him, even though it wasn't proper baby CPR. I started pushing on his chest, blowing in him, and I was literally puffing him up. And when I went to go push on him, milk was literally pouring out of him. Milk was pouring out of him. Fluids that was inside of him were literally pouring out of him.
Okay.
And I remember that very vividly. And I was just freaking out. I was calling his name multiple times. And I knew I needed to go get my phone and call 911.
Okay.
But my phone was in the kitchen. And we were in the back of the room, in back of the house, in the nursery. And I was actually worried that he was going to wake up and roll off the changing pad when I was gone for the 2 seconds. So I was like, I even told him to stay there, don't move. And I ran as fast as I could to go get my phone and told Connor to stay still, don't move. Something's going on, don't move. So Connor the entire time was like, sitting there freaked out, not even knowing what's going on. I make a call, tell the crew that I need a crew, gave them my address, told them I need an ambulance here. My child's unresponsive, and he is white, and there's no pulse, and there's nothing. I can't hear a heartbeat, I can't hear nothing. And the guy walked me through baby CPR, and I did that multiple times, asking the Lord to wake him up, bring him back, come on, wake up. Crew gets here, I immediately run out there and be like, come in here, run, hurry up, he needs help. And they get him there, they look at him, they're like, all right, we need to get him. They took him straight away to the ambulance. They didn't even do anything in there. They immediately took him to the ambulance. I'm trying to get a hold of her dad. I'm trying to get a hold of my dad, trying to get somebody in there to come watch Connor so I can go to the hospital. And so they take off to the hospital. I had to wait for a minute for my dad to actually get there. And then I ran off to the hospital. And in the meantime, I was telling Ashley what was going on and trying to explain to her the best I possibly could. And I'm shaking. I'm scared.
Sure.
And just don't know how to process this quite yet. And I get to the hospital trying to get somebody to help me, and they're like, hang on, wait a second. I'm like, I'm about ready to jump through this window. My son is back there. He just came in an ambulance. You're going to let me back there?
Yes.
I remember they tried to get us to sit down while they were working on him in the room, and we're like, we're not going to sit down. I just remember whole team of people around him, and I remember hearing you come in, and they were just working on him. Doctors working there. One doctor's walking back and forth, just pacing back and forth to trying to figuring out what they're doing. The monitor would beep as long as they were pumping and pushing air in there, and the moment they stopped, the monitor kept going off.
Okay.
So then they would resume compressions. They gave him several shots of, I think, epinephrine or something like that to try to actually get his heart to start back again. They couldn't shock him because they didn't have a heartbeat. And she got there, and I'll let you pick back up from there.
Okay, so we get to the hospital, and Amanda just drops me off at the door, and I go rushing in and tell them what I'm there for, and they take me back, and they're trying to take me into like this family room first. They even said something about, we'll take you in here, and I was like, no. And I looked in the room, and I'm like, this is not, I don't want to be in here. I want to be where my son is.
Right.
My husband and my dad are back there. I need you to take me back there. So she's like, okay. And she was like, I just want to prepare you. You know, it's going to look pretty bad. Like there's people all around him. He's hooked up to a lot of things. And I didn't care. I just wanted to be in there. So I walk through the doors, and sure enough, he's laying there. And, you know, nurses are all around him. And, you know, it's just a very chaotic scene. And I remember asking him, like, what happened? And he, of course, doesn't really know and tells me basically what we already know. And they tried to give me a chair, too, and I didn't want to sit. And so I started talking to Benjamin. I was like, Mommy's here. You can wake up now. And I remember praying out loud, Lord, please wake him up, save him. And they didn't work on him much longer after I got in there, and they called it. They didn't want to. I remember none of them did. The doctor said, is everybody comfortable with calling it? And he said, I know you're not comfortable with calling it, because all the nurses were like, no.
Wow.
But they had to. They'd already been working on him for probably half an hour at that point, because it took me 20 minutes to get there.
Yes.
They had been working on him for a while. Like I said, they gave him several shots to where they could not give him any more. The doctor asked, does anybody have anything else that we could even possibly try? Does anybody in this room have any idea of anything we could possibly do? And everybody just started shaking their heads. No, nobody had any ideas. And the doctor was like, and that's when he asked, is anybody comfortable? He's like, I know we're not. And he's like, but if there's nothing else we can do, then we have to call it. And they called it.
Yeah, I remember asking the doctor what happened to him, and he, of course, couldn't say for sure. You know, he said it seems like he must have aspirated. And so then I went over immediately to Benjamin, but he was still hooked up to some things. So I asked if I could hold him, and they said, no, we have to get him unhooked from all this first.
Okay.
but I laid over top of him, laid down over top of him. My dad had gone out at this point because my mom and sister were coming in.
Okay.
I remember I was laying over top of Benjamin, just crying and telling him I loved him and all these things, and I heard my mom scream because, well, actually that was later.
No, that was later.
My dad came back in.
Your dad came back in,
Yeah.
and you told your dad that they called
Yes.
it, they're not going to do anything else. And your dad just went over there and was over there with
Yeah.
you, to where both of you were actually over top of them before they told us that we need to move away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then your dad went out and told
That's when I
your
heard
mom. And then that's when we heard your mom, and she comes in there and she's screaming at the top of her lungs, no, and just screaming. She's walking in there, and Amanda comes in, is like hugging. They're all in tears. And
Yeah, they were trying to get to me, but there were so many people still in the room.
yeah,
And then the police officer came in, and as soon as that happened, he cleared the room.
yeah,
He wouldn't let anybody else in there but the two of us.
yeah.
And so it all kind of strange, I guess, because of infant death, they do things differently,
Yeah.
I guess.
And people who have never been around this don't understand what the procedure is.
Right.
And it's awful.
It was
I mean, they
awful
have to do it, but it's
because
Yeah, they do.
So we, my mom, I don't even think I got to hug my mom. We grabbed arms or something before they came in and basically just ushered them
your
out.
mom had only sat
Immediately,
down for about a minute.
an officer was questioning us both about what had happened. Of course,
Okay.
I was not at the house.
Okay.
So, he was talking to him more than anything.
Yeah.
And then, the officer left, and they gave us, at this point, we're sitting by his bed.
Yeah.
They still would not let me hold him. I asked multiple times. They never would let me hold him. A nurse stayed in there with us the entire time. I asked her. I mean, she was very sweet, and she didn't ever try to interrupt, because we were talking and we were crying and we were having our, whatever response we had at that point, sitting right there by his bed. And I asked her, I said, I'm not trying to be rude, but do you have to be in here the whole time? Because I just kind of felt like we didn't ever get any time alone with Benjamin. There was somebody always in there. They did say that they would let my dad come back in, but only because he was our pastor.
A minister, exactly.
But then they never did let him come back.
He never came in.
He never did come back. They ended up, I went to the restroom, and then I wanted to see my mom. They wouldn't let her back there. So I asked if I could go see my mom. So I went to the little family room they had, where a lot of our family was at that point.
Yeah.
And I remember just basically falling onto my mom and just crying. And, I remember telling her that they wouldn't let me hold him, because that was just something that it's still traumatic for me. The fact that they would not let me hold him.
Right.
I didn't get that chance. And so...
And that was because it was an infant death, right?
Yeah.
That, I guess they were just thinking
They
have to
wanted, because
investigate.
of the autopsy, they didn't want other fingerprints on him and stuff like that.
Okay.
Because there's always an autopsy with an infant death.
Okay.
And they didn't want any. I'm like, I've already touched him, because I went over there and laid
Right.
on top of him.
Right.
I don't know if they didn't notice or if they didn't, what happened there, because they did tell me I couldn't touch him, but I laid over top of him, kissed him, told him I loved him, all kinds of stuff. And then my dad came and laid over top of me.
I was hugging her.
But, it was just a very, very traumatic, because of all the protocols that go along with it.
Yes.
And so then they questioned me and him separately. They actually took him back to the house because they wanted him. He agreed to it. They asked him.
Yeah.
And he can tell that perspective, but they took him back to the house to show how he found him, like a reenactment.
Okay.
And so I stayed at the hospital, and so an officer was questioning me in a room, and my mom was in there and my aunt was in there, and I think my dad might have been in there too. And they were just asking me like what had my perspective of what had happened that morning, and was anything different, whatever. And I remember they were supposed to let me go back and see Benjamin one more time. I asked before I left the room, because I didn't want to leave him. I said, I don't want to leave him just yet, but they wanted me to be questioned. I said, well, I can come back and see him, right? and I didn't end up getting to. A medical examiner got there and locked down the room, they told me.
Oh, okay.
So I never really got to go, like, see him again and really, say goodbye,
I feel like you said your goodbyes to him.
From the hospital, it was just so hard. And then after that, after I can't go back in there to see him, he had gotten back, sometime in that, a few minutes after that, and, told him they weren't letting us go back there. And so it was just like, okay, what now? It felt wrong to leave.
Sure.
It felt wrong to leave him there, but there was no reason to stay. So I remember it being really, really hard to leave. Everybody just kind of like got up and walked out, like, was what we have to do.
An officer came back, the same officer that took me to the house. He told me I wasn't under arrest, but I had to ride in a car, which was very uncomfortable, in the back of the police car, which was very uncomfortable. But he just came in there. He's like, "Look, no one's kicking you out, but there's really no point in y'all staying here. So you stay as long as you need to, but I would suggest that y'all go ahead and go on home. Because there's nothing else you can do. The coroner has locked down the room, which the coroner could. He could supersede their authority.
Okay.
And actually lock down the room and tell the police, no, nobody can come in here, and they have to abide by that. So that was the hard part, to where they said we could go in, and then the coroner basically shut it down to where now we can't.
You can't.
Mm-hmm.
So that was hard. And then doing the walkthrough, I went there, had a detective and I think another officer there at the house with me, as well as with the one that came with me. And I did the reenactment, told them what was going on. I used a stuffed bear to reenact everything, and they just took down some notes, looked at some stuff, and then that was about it. It wasn't much to it. They just wanted to know what actually happened. And then when I got back with her to the hospital, we were just trying to get ourselves straight. And I remember when we were still back in the room, I called my older brother, Jonathan, and because the cell phone reception was not good in there. My mom had tried calling him, and he tried calling her, and they couldn't get through, so he called me. And I ended up telling him what happened, and he was just like, his reaction to me was, I have no words, and I love you.
Right.
And that was it. That was basically the conversation. It was like we didn't have any words. So when we decided to finally leave shortly after, we all just kind of, we had like her aunt and her husband and like several other family members with us, to where we all were just kind of like, what are we going to do? Because by that time it was already evening time. So we went back to her parents' house, and I just remember just getting there, and when we got into the parking lot, we just kind of took a minute, and then next thing you know, the Kachera, John and Sue Kachera, pulled up right next to us, and they immediately got out of their vehicle, and as soon as they saw us, they grabbed us.
Oh.
And just squeezed us in the biggest sandwich hug.
Yeah, I call it a sandwich hug.
It felt really good, because it's exactly what we needed. No words were said. We didn't talk. They didn't really say anything to us. They just squeezed us and just held it there for I don't know how many minutes.
Yeah, it felt like several minutes. They had lost a son unexpectedly.
That's right.
The December prior to that.
Yep.
So one of the things we appreciated about it was, they just happened to be riding by the way, because I mean they live nearby my parents.
Yeah.
They were on their way to dinner and just happened to be riding by, saw us in the parking lot. We were actually standing there hugging and kind of holding each other, because we hadn't really done that, and
No.
I was crying and
No,
kind
I
of
was too
had
busy trying to hold you up.
Yeah, I was kind of like my first like losing it moment, I guess, because at the hospital I cried, but I felt like, because it was just the two of us, we hadn't really been alone, even though we were out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
There were, we weren't alone in the hospital, and so we were kind of having our little moment, and they just happened to be riding by, stopped,
Wow.
got out, and I don't even know if we even realized they were there. And they literally sandwiched us in a just giant tight hug and held us for several minutes.
Yeah.
So we appreciated that, but also one of the things we appreciated was that they didn't say, we know how you feel because we lost a son too. In fact, I think they said something opposite, like, you know, we they didn't want to compare, you know, because that's something that I feel like people do when they lose someone. They want to compare it to somebody else's loss, and there is no comparison.
Right.
We had a pastor tell us that you're in the same boat, but the storm is different. Is that what it was?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Something about a boat in a storm.
Well, and you make a good point, because everybody's grief is different, because you are grieving that person like no one else can grieve that person, whatever your relationship was. So you're right. We can all look at each other and say we had some of the same things or went through some of the same feelings, but nobody's exact grief is the same.
Yes.
Right.
So I appreciated that. And also, John said something about don't go down the what if road.
Right.
You know, he advised us of that right away. He said it's just not necessary. You're not going to go, and that's not going to lead to anywhere helpful. So I remember that. I remember Sue just hugged me separately after our sandwich hug was over and like grabbed my face, and she was just so sweet. You know, there is a sort of a connection when moms lose a child.
I would think so.
You know, to understand, you know, even though it's a different loss, way different, you know, because of their circumstances and ours, but I just felt like it was like a moment where two moms were just like, I see the hurt. I know what your heart is feeling. So that was special and sweet. Some different people stopped by the house to see us, and my parents' house, and Connor wasn't there right away. And he ended up going with my brother-in-law because his dad came to watch Connor, but my brother-in-law showed up just minutes after him to take Connor so that his dad could go to the hospital.
Okay.
So he was with my brother-in-law and some cousins for all this. Okay. And they came to the house. We didn't say anything to Connor at that point. No. It wasn't until we got home.
So you've told us about the day that he passed away. What were the days after that like?
So I feel like we have some negatives and some positives that we would like to, you know, kind of share. I mean, obviously, thinking of the negatives, we were in shock, you know, very numb feeling. The next day was Sunday. I remember Saturday night, it was going to be Mother's Day, of course.
I did not connect that this happened on Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah. So it's going to be Mother's Day, and my dad, of course, he's the pastor of church there, asked me specifically if I was okay with him having the service. He was just going to have the morning service, no Sunday school, no evening. And I said, yeah, we want to be with our church family, you know, and which wasn't even really a question for us. Like, we wanted to have church and we wanted to go. Wow. And so he had service, and I remember, you know, it was definitely hard just getting up that next morning and just the reality of Benjamin not being there, or even coming home that night that he died into the house. I remember one of the first things I saw was this jumperoo thing he had that was right by the door. Okay. And I remember telling him, you need to put this away. Sure. That was the only thing we put away immediately. Okay. And then he shut the nursery door before I could even get down the hall. And it stayed that way for weeks. Oh. You know, but some things we kept out there, you know, like I mentioned his play mat that he had been playing on, and there were even books, there were toys that we hadn't put away that we actually kept out there for several days. You know, different things of his that we didn't move. It just felt wrong to move it. But, you know, it was hard because just the reality of him not being there, of course, was just really hard for us, you know.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we had to, of course, that Monday, go to the funeral home, make arrangements. My dad went with us. And obviously that was tough, you know, something we never thought we would have to do.
We were asking ourselves, is this what we're really doing the entire time? We kept saying, are we really doing this? Are we really doing this? Are we really planning the funeral for our almost 7-month-old son. Did we just really do that? Did we?
Yes.
We just kept being in shock to where we just could not believe that this is where we were at, and that this is what we were having to deal with at this moment in time. Instead of wondering, oh, am I going to have enough? Am I going to get up and go to work and get this done? And is everything going to go okay? Is everything going to get out the door just fine? No, we were concerned about how is Connor handling everything, because that night he even asked us about where is Benjamin.
Okay.
And we tried to tell him, but he didn't quite understand it. He thought we could go get him.
Oh, wow.
He thought that we could go to heaven and go get him.
Sure.
Or that they would bring him to us. And we were trying to get him to understand that that's not how it works. So we were dealing with that, and then also with the funeral home, and then we went to the cemetery, and then we were dealing with the coroner, which turned out to be very stressful. And because they just wanted to do a lot of poking and prodding.
Okay.
And because of him having a broken arm when he was 5 weeks old, that we had not been explained, that no one knew what happened, how it happened, and they really looked at us hard. Sure. And it was unfounded. They couldn't find any evidence to where no one doesn't even know how it even happened to this day. And so they were taking extra long with the coroner to where we almost missed the funeral.
Oh my.
We almost missed the funeral to where
they didn't get his body back until like the Friday evening, and the funeral was Saturday morning.
Yep.
Okay.
So we waited all week. I would call every day because we were waiting because they were going to, of course, let us go view him at the funeral, like a private viewing and all, before we had like the visitation, which his casket was going to be closed anyway. But so we, just all week we're waiting, but we were kind of being pushed off, and it come to find out it was because they were looking more into this because of the broken arm. They actually took the bone out of his arm to like examine it further. Yeah. And that really upset me. And I know that they have to do certain things in autopsies, but it's just hard to hear that they're doing that to him.
Yes.
And told us that it hadn't healed properly, and even though we had been told it was, he'd had multiple x-rays. And so I felt like that was just insult to injury in a lot of ways, because with being under investigation and stuff like that, it just made it harder. You're already grieving and you're already dealing with the natural things of like arrangements and all that kind of stuff, but that just added to it, and it just made it, I feel like, more just even harder.
So you're going through unspeakable loss, and then on top of it you have investigation because it was a child and because of something earlier, and then you have all of these things happening. I cannot even comprehend. You had to wake up, like you were talking about, Alex, every day and just think, I mean, when you first woke up every day, did you just have to relive it and think, oh, is this
Yes.
is really happening?
Yeah, it did. It was kind of like that,
That Sunday we just woke up and we're like, Benjamin's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And because my first reaction was to go in there and wake him up and give him his bottle, like we've done 100 times. But he wasn't there. And it's like, Benjamin's really gone. This really happened. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't something made up. It's not anything. It really happened.
Yeah, I feel like every time we left the house and then got back to the house, it was like new again. Because you're used to leaving with the four of us. You're leaving with both boys. And buckling. I remember us saying things about like putting them in the car, because you're only putting one kid in the car, and it was just all those things were just like, it just kind of smacked us in the face every time.
Because we have both of our vehicles set up for both
Sure,
kids.
both kids.
And we would lock his car seat in, and then we would have Connor into his seat, and we'd have them both taken care of. But then we'd look over and we'd always see that to where there is no car seat over there for Benjamin.
Yeah, and it just felt wrong, you know.
Yeah. Felt like we were missing something every single time that we would leave, because we'd have Benjamin, we'd have the bag, we'd have Connor, we'd have whatever else we need.
Right.
And changed everything. And on top of that, we found out also that when the police let us leave from the hospital, they told us no one getting arrested, no one's getting charged or anything like that. When they told us that we could leave from the hospital, we asked them, is anybody else coming to see us? Does anybody need to come?
Like
Are we good to go? Does CPS need to come?
Questioning us.
And they're like, no, they're going to get with you Sunday. And so we're like, okay. Well, then we get with them and we find out that's false information.
Okay.
So they were like, no, you were supposed to wait for us there. We were going to have somebody come. And we're just sitting here like... So we're trying to figure out all this confusion, because now we're getting stuff thrown at us saying that we did something wrong.
Okay.
And it's like, we answered all the questions and we clarified to make sure that we did everything right, that we were good to go, so to speak. And that we were okay, and that we were following every single direction that they asked us to do, you know?
Okay.
And then come to find out, nope, that's wrong. And so they came there and talked to us and just tried to, and so we were dealing with that confusion as well. So there was a lot of confusion, especially the first week, and everything that was just so hard to just truly comprehend everything, to get everything together, to be able to make sense of everything. And on top of that, we were trying to grieve and also plan the funeral for our son.
Wow.
So it was very rough. But there are some positive stuff that during that time, we actually saw the Lord really, really work in that. And the first time that we saw that was at the funeral home, actually.
Okay.
When we went to the funeral home, funerals are very expensive.
Yes.
You can Google it, you can look it up, it doesn't matter whether you are old, young, or whatever.
Okay.
The prices don't change.
Okay.
So, but the director there knew Pastor Davis, kind of knew us, and they're like, all of our services are going to be for free.
Wow.
All of our services are going to be for free. You don't owe us anything. We are going to charge you what we pay for the coffin. We're not going to upcharge it. We have to do that because that's literally what we have to pay in order to order the coffin in. We do not have one in stock. And so...
What a blessing.
The price ended up being less than $1,000. And then we get to the cemetery, and the director of the cemetery said, this is your child, pick out a plot, it's yours.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
And the other thing is we someone put us up for like donation, knowing that we were going to need help. A GoFundMe, and we had just received a check for $1,000 in the GoFundMe.
Oh.
to where the Lord was really, really working in that aspect and just put things together. And just that Sunday when I got up to when we went to church there, we just decided to have just a prayer service. We didn't really know. Pastor Davis was not in the mood to preach. And I remember we all prayed, and I stood up and I prayed, and I do not remember what I prayed. So
that's the grace of God that you were able to pray at all.
I don't remember what I was able to even stand up and pray. Mm-hmm. But we just saw the Lord really work, and just His comforting hand through that week. And
even in the midst of everything going on with CPS.
Even in the midst of it, and it's through God's grace that we were able to make it through there, and His alone. Because me and Ashley wanted to curl up into a ball and disappear.
Because people don't have money set aside for their child's funeral normally.
Right.
I mean, it's not the same as being prepared with life insurance or something. That is, that's...
No one is prepared to bury their 7-month-old child.
Absolutely.
Nope.
Yes, I do remember that the financial burden was something we were very concerned about, and of course that was taken care of, and that was just such a huge blessing from the Lord, we didn't expect. And so that was very helpful to us. We had family and friends, church family, who just surrounded us, right away with love and meals. And my sister-in-law set up the GoFundMe page to help with, expenses and stuff, because like you mentioned, it's unexpected.
Right.
Completely unexpected loss. So the financial burden, of course, they didn't want us to have to worry about that. So we just had a lot of help, people who came to watch Connor so we could go, take care of different things. I know my sister came and his brother and sister-in-law came just so we could go, out and run, do this or that to take care of different things, pick out the flowers or make the arrangements, different things like that. So, and they, would help out while they were there, do things that we didn't ask them to do, like laundry or dishes. And
Okay.
so we just had some very sweet moments like that because of the people around us. I feel like that really helped us in the days after, just to mention something positive, because, obviously it was a very rough time, but those things were little reminders that God was there, and it really helped us be able to kind of carry on, because I don't know that we would have been able to, well, I know that we wouldn't have been able to do it without the Lord, but even the Lord's, sending these people to us to help us and working things out financially and, working everything out so that we could have the funeral when we wanted it and all that. Everything worked out, even though it didn't seem like it was going to at the time. And so that was very helpful for us in the days following, for sure.
And they were able to go ahead and have the funeral scheduled.
Yes, we had the funeral scheduled. When we had the visitation Friday evening, Benjamin was not actually there.
Okay.
His body was, Benjamin wasn't there anyway.
Okay. Right.
His
I know
body
what you
was
mean, but his
actually
body-
not there. And so, and I don't know that anybody really knew that except for our family, just
Okay.
because his casket was closed anyway, and so it
Okay.
didn't really matter. But they didn't receive his body back until Friday evening. And so then
They only had it for like a couple.
they didn't,
like
so then,
barely an hour
Yeah.
before we had the visitation, so he was nowhere near ready.
right.
So
then Saturday morning we were able to go and have a
So-
little private
You had
time there
time.
at the church, just
Okay.
the two of us.
Okay.
Before, and then our family, of course, too, and then before the actual service started. So
Did you get news from CPS before the funeral and have that resolved, or did y'all still have to
No.
go on with that?
we actually
yeah.
went on with that. So it was, we were mostly, it was him
yeah, it was me.
that was under investigation because I was not home
Okay.
at the time of
Okay.
the death. So he was actually not allowed to be alone with Connor. That was the safety plan.
Okay.
He couldn't be alone with Connor. So that actually went in all the way until like mid-September.
Okay.
It went on for months. And I remember, I would call or text because we had a caseworker who was supposed to come by and wouldn't show up. Different things, a lot of it was just not done well or right. Very unprofessional, to be honest. But I would call probably every day to see if there was any news on anything, because they were waiting. We didn't get the cause of death until August, mid-August.
Okay.
And of course,
And he had passed in May?
May.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was part of the reason why it was taking so long. Then once they had the cause of death, it was just still,
What did they rule the cause as, if you don't mind telling us?
They ruled it as undetermined. The medical examiner said there was not enough evidence to prove abuse, but there wasn't really enough to disprove it either. Kind of a weird situation.
Even with throwing up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even with all
yeah.
that, and we have had multiple people tell us that it sounded like SIDS,
Yes.
sound like a version of SIDS, sounds like we had all kinds of other stuff, because my family has a lot of medical people. My mom, my sister-in-law, and her mom actually worked. My sister-in-law's mom actually worked with younger babies. She was a peds nurse, pediatric nurse. And she was telling me her opinion on that stuff, because of course we were trying to figure out stuff as well. And but yeah, it was ruled undetermined because they just It's very weird.
Yeah, I remember I talked to her on the phone, and I asked her, well, what do you think happened? And she said something about, like suffocation or something. I said, well, wouldn't have there been some evidence of that? And she said, not if it's done right. And I just said, how dare you say that? Because she was basically, I firmly believe, and I wish that I'd had the mind to really be able to think at that time. Because in hindsight, I would have asked for a second opinion or something, because I really think that once she found out that he had had that broken arm, and see, CPS had not reported that to the state.
Okay.
And so it came out in a weird way, I guess.
Okay.
The ME found it out kind of not in a straightforward way.
Okay.
And so then I believe she was kind of blinded by that into thinking that there had been a history of abuse.
Yeah.
And so she was kind of biased, or maybe just didn't have a clear thinking when she did her medical examination. Like,
Okay.
so because she told me it couldn't be SIDS. He was too old for SIDS. All this, which I didn't know. She knows
Right.
more than I know. I didn't know
Sure.
what the ages are for that. I didn't think that he was too old for it, but she's the medical professional, so I couldn't really argue with her. I felt like I wish I'd had more knowledge at the time to be able to ask more questions, because I have since found out that Benjamin had a vitamin D deficiency.
Okay.
And so that could have very well been why his arm broke.
Yeah.
Oh,
He could have had a problem
absolutely.
with his bones, and when he was cleared at the Children's Hospital, he was cleared. They did a bone survey. All of his other bones were fine. It was healing properly, so they didn't see any signs of any kind of problem. But they also told us it was healed. But then we found out when he passed away that it wasn't fully healed
Okay.
when they did the autopsy. So now I'm wondering if they weren't, negligent in some way. And even in that situation that we dealt with when he was 5 weeks old, we weren't treated very well, in that situation, because when they learned that he had a broken arm, they, just kind of, things got kind of weird, and they kept him there at the hospital, and I stayed with him. They wouldn't let me take him. I couldn't leave with him.
Okay.
And so he had to stay until he could have a full bone survey, and they could determine that there were no other breaks and things like that. So all of that kind of came back up again, which was difficult to deal with. But
Yeah.
at the time, that was hard, because we had to live with my parents for 2 weeks, because we could neither one be alone with the boys, because we were both home when we discovered his arm. Well, he was crying in pain when we were trying to change him, and so we took him to the emergency room, and they discovered that he had a broken arm, and we were like, what?
Yeah.
So, but that was very stressful at the time. It was nothing compared to losing him.
Yeah.
But kind of brought all that back, and then it just made it so hard, because he couldn't be alone with Connor, and
Okay.
for all those months, and so it made things difficult. I feel like that just added to the already, I guess I don't want to say normal grief, but the grief
Yes.
you already are experiencing, and then we had this happen, and so that definitely made it harder, I feel like. So
And you were able to come through that.
yeah.
It was hard. And see, we didn't even realize that CPS hadn't reported the way they were supposed to, because they didn't do that. It wasn't the fact that we weren't trying to hide it. It was they didn't do it, and they dropped the ball on that, and then we were paying for it.
Okay.
We were paying for it because now it went to a higher level, and CPS and us were being looked at very hard because of it.
Yeah,
Sure.
and really in the end we found out that part of the reason why it went on so long was because the CPS, our local CPS, was also being looked at.
Yeah, that was a huge issue that we were just dealing with. That was just so hard to feel like we could even breathe.
And you were eventually exonerated from all that,
yes.
obviously.
Yes.
And how do you feel about that now? Thinking, God, how did you allow this in our life when we hadn't done something?
Right. I mean, it is easy to look at it that way, and very frustrating when we do think about it. But then we also have to stop and pause and be like, but the Lord worked it out. It could have been worse because they could have taken Connor.
Sure.
And they could have taken Connor and Benjamin away from us the very first time.
Sure.
But that didn't happen, to where it was actually very minimal to what happened compared to what's happened to other people.
Sure.
So we could look at it in a negative way, and it is very easy to, considering that we weren't treated properly.
Sure.
But also we have to remember that it could have been worse, and the Lord definitely worked it out to where we came through pretty much
Yes.
as best as you possibly can in that situation.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say though that it was tough, because it was like we were already dealing with, the loss.
Sure.
Why this too? So I understand why you would ask that. And so I do think it did make it harder, because we definitely did, question God and why did this happen? And, just add this to it. But I don't know that in the moment we really even thought that way,
No, not at first. We were just trying to process everything, trying to get everything lined up to where we could figure out what we need to do next.
Okay.
Like I said, the first week was just rough. I only had a week bereavement from work. I wasn't quite ready to go back, and my boss pulled me aside and he's like, if you need to step off the floor and you need any help or anything like that, do it.
Okay.
Because I knew I was coming back off a week.
Yeah,
of
that's
just being
not.
gone.
Yeah,
It's
not long.
That's not long. That's not long, especially dealing with what we had to deal with.
Yes.
My brain was still going a mile a minute.
Yes.
And so we were just, at the time, we were just trying to get everything done and just trying to get ourselves together.
Hey, it helps my Nana if you're watching on YouTube to like and subscribe. If you are listening on the podcast, please like and follow. We would love for you to do that now to help our channel grow and become a blessing to others.